I know other people are due to attend as well, but Adam will sort of let them in. If everyone can just put themselves on mute and also turn off their cameras for the meantime. Later on, we will get some time to ask any questions if you've got any questions to ask, so you can then pop your cameras and microphones on. But for the main part, if we could just turn off our cameras and mute ourselves. So welcome everyone to the West Midlands Social Work Teaching Partnership Practice Week. I'm Sukhvir Kaur Dhillon. I'm one of 3 consultant social workers within the Teaching Partnership. For those of you that don't know a lot about the Teaching Partnership, I just thought I'd start off with just summarising really what the Teaching Partnership is. We're one of 23 accredited teaching partnerships which are funded by the Department of Education, and the DFE set up these teaching partnerships in order to strengthen the quality of social work education for our students and also to improve practice for our practitioners across the West Midlands. The partnership includes a number of local authorities within the West Midlands, children's trusts, NHS trusts, and also higher education institutes, which are universities. There are a total 28 partners, so there might be a number of you within the room today that are part of the partnership. So hello to everyone, and for those that are not in our partnership as well, welcome. The partnership very much works with practitioners, senior managers, academics, because you are the experts out there in terms of improving our social work education and improving our practice as well. Okay. In terms of, we just talked about cameras and microphones. If you require any captions like subtitles, there is a way to turn them on. If you look at the top bar next to the chat box, you've got 3 dots. You can actually go in there and turn on your captions if you need to. Just a bit of a warning, they're not very accurate, so sometimes it'll come out with stuff that you think, that doesn't make sense. But just if you need them, it's there if you need it. This session will be recorded because it will be used as a post sort of resource for the teaching partnership, so people that couldn't attend today, they can access it afterwards. Okay, so I think that's enough from me. I want to leave enough time for Ian, so I want you to welcome Ian Thomas today, who will be delivering this session on reflections from a social worker with lived experience. And I've listened to Ian speak several times, so I know that you'll find him really interesting, and I know that he will leave you feeling very reflective. So thank you. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Sukhvir. Yes, we've worked together for years off and on, and it's a pleasure always. So thank you for such a warm introduction. It's good to see some familiar faces in the background too. You know, and yeah, I guess we're all on this journey together, aren't we, in some respects? So I'm going to be here for an hour. I'm going to talk about some of my experiences as somebody who's kind of been through the system as a looked after child, and then sort of, you know, progressed, I don't know if you could call it progression, but into adult services and sort of criminal justice, addiction, mental health, things like that. And you know, how I became a social worker, and you know, and try and touch on some of those things and the key learning throughout that journey as well, and not only sort of say where I went and what happened, but kind of what I went through, and give you some kind of insight into the sort of internal factors that go on and play out as a result of sort of the external factors. And you know, if you have any questions, stick them in the chat box, and we are going to save some time at the end for a bit of reflection and discussion as well. But first, I just want to ask you to participate in a short activity. And we'll conclude on why I'm asking you to do this at the end. So what I'd like you to do is to take a few minutes to write down 10 things that you're grateful for. And also to send a text message to somebody who, you know, you may want to reach out to, for example, thanking a friend for their friendship, or reminding someone that you love them, or a colleague that you're grateful for, the professional relationship you have, or someone may have done something for you recently, or you might want to just tell someone that you wish them well and that you're thinking about them. And if we could just spend a few moments doing that, and then there'll be an opportunity for people to share what they've written at the end, but there's absolutely no obligation, so please don't let that dictate what you may or may not normally put in. And then I'll carry on. So I'm going to write my 10 things now, and I'm going to send my text message. Right, I've done my 10 things, and if you're still doing yours, please just continue or do what you can manage. And there's a key reason why I've done this, and I will conclude on the end. So please stay tuned for how we can work that one out. So yeah, and it's really important, and I've asked you to do that for reasons to contribute to your development and each other's development as well, and what's possible even within the realms of what we're contending with that isn't always within our control. And on that note, I've kind of had to live with quite a lot of things that haven't been in my control, and contend with circumstances that I haven't been happy about, to say the least. And today I'm here as a qualified social worker. I think I qualified 2 years ago. I've spent sort of the last 2 years working in international development, trying to get fostering off the ground in sort of low to middle income countries, working with UNICEF and governments and NGOs in places like Madagascar, India, and some work in a refugee camp as well, in the Middle East, in a Syrian refugee camp in Jordan, all of which I did remotely throughout the lockdown project. So it's really interesting what can be achieved really through Teams and Zooms and online meetings and stuff, and kind of networking and strategizing. So and then before that I worked in fostering for the last 10 years, mainly in the independent sector, and some experiences working with adults seeking recovery from addiction, and young people in conflict with the law. So there's quite a lot in there really, and I genuinely have a life beyond my wildest dreams, because I couldn't have dreamt this life that I have, and I didn't always know that it was possible for someone like me to live like this. I just didn't know that it was possible for someone like me to live like this, and if it was, again, it wasn't possible for someone like me. And you know, my experiences, you know, kind of stem back from, you know, such a young age in terms of the challenges that you know, I lived with, and I recognised that you don't have to have been in foster care or children's homes and all through those kind of experiences to, you know, yeah, adversity, you know, is all around us, right? And I don't sort of speak from a place of, you know, knowing more about it, you know, as a result of my experiences. I recognise that lots of people come into this profession because they've had their own experiences, and you know, people feel passionate about that too, and that's really important. And I guess something else I do on my training a lot that I deliver is I ask people to introduce themselves, which I know we're not going to do that now because this is not that kind of forum. And I ask people to say how they're feeling on a scale of 1 to 10. So 1 not very intense, 10 very intense, and you know, I've worked with a lot of foster carers specifically online, and the feeling that seems to come up a lot at the moment is stressed and anxious, you know, and I'm really grateful that people are honest about that, you know, and before sort of lockdown, I used to ask foster carers and practitioners how they felt. A lot of people would say, all right, okay, yeah, all right, I guess. And what I started to realise was, and this is an observation, and maybe it was the wrong forum to try and assess this really, but I started to notice quite quickly that there wasn't a great deal of emotional language in social work or sort of social care practitioners, and there wasn't always much of a forum for people to talk about how they feel. You know, and that's really interesting. And I know we're not qualified therapists, and you know, but I'm only here because I've learned how to talk about how I feel. You know, I'm only here because I've learned an emotional language, because, you know, my recovery or my ability to be here has been about, you know, recovering from trauma and you know, things that have overwhelmed me and you know, enslaved me to behave in ways and think in certain ways that I felt so out of control of. So I always, you know, I guess I feel quite passionate about talking about sort of thoughts and feelings, because I think that we all know, you know, what happens when a child goes into care in terms of the procedures, and we often know the you know, the external physical risks to children when abuse and neglect takes place. But I think that, you know, where the real value is, you know, I say we all know within reason, you know, we have an idea, right? We assess these situations, you know, day in, day out, you know, for some of us in our work, but we don't all have an idea of the internal factors that sort of play out, you know, and what I've tried to do in my career and you know, is to try and share some of those insights with people. And I guess my professional objective, and perhaps personal as well, you know, one, I think, you know, I like telling people I'm a social worker. One, because sometimes I quite like the reaction, because it is a mixed bag if we're all honest. And two, you know, I hope that it conveys a message that I care about people and that I'm interested in people's rights and well-being, and I want to contribute to their development. You know, and I hope that when we talk about social work and talk about feelings and place care on individuals' needs, that, you know, that what we can do is that, you know, we can continue to cultivate that, because, you know, it's easy to lose sight of that, you know, with what goes on, you know, and so I hope that today can be sort of a positive experience about why we're all here. And you know what, on the subject of thoughts and feelings, as long back as I can remember, the first feeling I could ever identify was fear, and it just wasn't practical for me to live in fear, you know, so very quickly I became angry, because, you know, being fearful was too unsafe and not sustainable, but being angry felt safe and felt more sustainable. And you know, what I now know is that you know, my ego was constructing narratives about the world around me to protect me from it, you know, and because the care I was receiving from my family was consistently inconsistent. Now, you know, and I remember being at school and looking at all the other children, and they were playing and interacting and talking, and I remember watching them thinking, you know, how do you know how to do this? Like, I was at a complete loss, and I was a little thinker, you know. I was always thinking and always watching and always questioning everything, and I think the introspection and you know, rumination and all that stuff, I think it sometimes is a terrible gift, you know. And because, you know, it kind of took my peace away, really, and I wasn't able to be, and I recognized that I had a predisposition within myself that I was projecting onto the world around me. And I remember asking the child at school, I said, have they told you something and told you not to tell me? And he looked at me like I was mad. And I remember thinking, they're good at this, you know, they know how to hide this, you know. And so from a very, very, very young age, I had this sort of paranoia about the world, because I couldn't possibly feel this lost and disconnected and sort of separated from everything. You know, there had to be a reason for it. And you know, at the time I wanted to try and find that reason, so I was asking those kind of questions. And I guess, you know, what I found was that in reflection, you know, home life wasn't good, and I hadn't built secure, safe attachments, and I was looking outside of myself for answers, you know. And school was just very, very difficult, and I didn't really understand why I had to go there or what the purpose of it all was. And I still feel a little bit like that now when I look back at school. I think it's really important because we need to read and write and stuff, but it was all about telling me what to think and never how to think, and I wasn't really shown how to think, so I was too emotionally and psychologically preoccupied to engage in a learning process, and therefore I couldn't fit in, and I couldn't join the status quo, and I just felt really uncomfortable really quickly. And the only way I could manage feeling so uncomfortable was to, you know, create distractions or be destructive or push back against, you know, the boundaries that were in place. And very, very quickly I was sort of suspended from primary school, and, you know, meetings in the office with the teachers, and then comes the stigma, you know, of that kind of child that I was, and the problems that I created or came with, and problem family and things like this. And all the while home life was deteriorating, and you know, and I was knocking about with older kids, lost interest in, you know, playing with young people my age, and anything that school had to offer, and then, you know, I was sort of being initiated into a world of sort of crime, and, you know, and all the stuff that goes on with marginalisation. And at 9 years old, I went to school one day, and social worker came to talk to me. I went home that day. Went back to school the next day. A social worker came to talk to me again and said, you're not going to go home. And I went into a children's home, and I remember sat opposite the table with a guy eating an apple, telling me about sort of the rules, and you know, what time I had to be in bed, and how much pocket money I got, and this, that and the other. And this residential home was, I now know, sort of notorious. You know, it was on the edge of a big estate. It kind of had access to, you know, all the shenanigans that go on in sort of, you know, big council estates where, you know, inevitably there's, you know, deprivation and poverty and a world of challenges there. And again, I just accessed all of that stuff and engaged in it. And what I found was that the staff were kind of, you know, in crisis management mode. And the young people, you know, would either bully you or try and parent you, and I'd have to navigate that. And I've worked a lot with young people who are looked after, and one of my observations from my own experiences and young people I've engaged with is that, you know, very intuitive and observant, and even under all the presenting behaviour, it's clocking up. You know, it's the data is going in and it's being stored. And I reflect on conversations and situations, you know, that I had as a child then, that I sort of now filter through an adult brain and sort of view very differently. And and I guess there's lots to say about that. We don't always see the fruits of our intervention, and also whatever we do around children and young people will be processed with an adult brain at some point, and they'll grow up and they'll judge us and they'll say you were helpful or you weren't, or it was okay or it wasn't okay, and we don't always get that right. Outside the paradigms of right and wrong and good and bad practice, it's just about how people interpret it and what they make it mean. And for me, I had a set of experiences as a child that meant, I developed some ideas about the world and some ideas about myself. And those experiences, started to construct like a blueprint of how I saw the world. And wherever I went, I would sort of put that blueprint onto the world, and it would be a lens, and I'd see the world through the lens of that blueprint. And the architectures of that blueprint were sort of belief systems and values and kind of, response mechanisms that I'd sort of start to predict, and the belief systems were the engine that was driving all my behavior and my thinking, and those belief systems were that I'm not significant, that I'm unworthy of receiving love, that if I get close to you, you'll harm me, and the world is an unsafe place, and my earliest memories were, parents fighting, or my mum fighting with a partner, and punching and all of that stuff, so I obviously constructed some ideas about the world, and that became part of my blueprint. So when I came into the children's home, and I'm sort of contending with children that were trying to bully me or parent me, it got very confusing and very difficult, but I soon had to learn strategies to survive. And eventually I was introduced to foster care, and I could write a book on foster care. I lived with around 20 families, and I could say that, it wasn't all bad and it wasn't all good. And it was very confusing, because every time you go to a new house, it's a whole new regime and a new way of seeing the world. And there's a few things really that I feel really passionate about when we talk about placing children with families. I think that as much as possible, children need to participate in that process and that decision, I'm really big on welcome booklets, because I would get to a family and the social worker would, drop me off, and we'd be in the car on the way, and, they'd say something along the lines of, they're really down to earth, they're really nice people, you're going to love it here, all that stuff. And then you get there and you go upstairs and you kind of like start to sort of look in your room and unpack your bag, and then, and then you realise the social worker has left and you've forgotten the names of the foster carers. That happened to me so much. So I'm sat in the room thinking, I've got to go downstairs and talk to them, but I don't know their names. I forgot, because I'm just so distracted. And they didn't have welcome booklets back then. No one even thought of things like that. So you go downstairs and you're waiting for somebody to use somebody's name so you can identify who people are, and you'd be surprised that when people live with each other, they don't really use names as much as you'd think, if you try and notice that. And it's often about power language, and the way someone asks a question or the type of question they ask normally indicates who in the family or the room they're talking to. And if there's only two people, rarely do people use names. That was my observation. So a welcome booklet could solve all of that, because it can have pictures and names, and you can sit on it with your bed and things like that. And then you get used to the sort of the smell of the sheets and the dog or the park or the stuff that goes on in the area. Now, for me, a process always played out. Now, when we look after children, the children that come to stay with us in whatever capacity, whether it's, social worker or family-based care, they come with a catalogue of experience, and some of those experiences suggest that we're going to leave them or hurt them or abandon them or let them down in some ways, so. And for me, I projected that catalogue of experience onto every situation, because I had a set of belief systems that were the architectures of that blueprint, and those belief systems were the engine that was driving that behaviour. And normally I'm trying to confirm the negative belief systems that I carry about myself, that I'm unworthy of receiving love, I'm insignificant, you're going to hurt me, let down so much, and so forth. And what would happen to me is that this family would become valuable to me, and then fear and anxiety of loss and abandonment would overwhelm me, and I'm contending with a compulsion to act out negatively you know, on this obsession that's overwhelming, and I'm questioning everything, observing every intricacy and every move, every mannerism, looking to confirm this belief system, believing they don't really want me there anymore, that I'm unwelcome, until it gets so overwhelming and I just explode, and you know, a series of events will probably take place. And for me, I'd smash my bedroom up and say I don't want to be here anymore, and, you know, kick off at school and just cause a whole heap of problems, because that was the only way I could tell people I'm hurting right now and I don't know what else to do about it. And then I'd go off to the next place. Now, and I'd be in the car, you know, with the social worker, and we'd be having a conversation. It'd be something along the lines of, they're really down to earth, they're new foster carers, great furniture, nice door, dog, and I think furniture in the room. And I remember one of the social workers asking me not to smash up the furniture in this house, and saying, look, Ian, you've really got to behave, because I don't think the local authority are going to pay for another placement, and you'll probably have to go back to the children's home, which was always a fear of mine because I didn't feel safe there. And you know, and again, like, I'd say, all right, I promise I'm going to behave, I promise it's going to be different this time. And here's the thing, if you link me up to a lie detector test and say, Ian, are you going to behave when you go to this new family? I'd say yes, and I would have passed the test, because I meant it. Like, I really meant it. I really wanted to be a good boy. I really wanted to have a good home, a stable, you know, life, and you know, experience connection, care, authenticity, all those things, you know. And I had no language for that then, but I really wanted those things. And what happened was, you know, I get there, and again, you know, the family would become valuable to me. Fear and anxiety of loss and abandonment would overwhelm me. I'd start to think they don't really like me, they don't really want me here, you know, their own kids don't like me, all this sort of stuff. And then it would just become so overwhelming, and I'd start to collate a catalogue of evidence to justify the belief systems that I'm carrying. And then, you know, loads of stuff would go on, and I behave in lots of ways that you know, would make life difficult, and you know, the placement would break down, and I'd have to leave. And after a while, what I noticed was that when I left the placement, I would feel the weight of the world lift off my shoulders, because having valuable relationships was a big burden, and I didn't know how to manage them. I didn't know how to manage the feelings, and it was painful having anything of meaning to me. And it was less painful to sabotage things and to gain a sense of control, you know. But in the same breath, which, you know, I really wanted to have meaning, and I really wanted to have closeness and relationships, but I didn't know how to manage those. And I guess every time it broke down and I move on, it chips away at his hope. You have less hope for life and in yourself, and it confirms their negative belief systems, and they go again. And I spent, you know, most of my care journey, you know, experiencing that, really. And it was difficult. And you know, one of the observations, you know, I kind of made, and I talk to foster carers a lot about this now, is that and I don't have a straight answer, because as diverse as children and young people are, so must our care be. And I only speak for myself. I'm not an expert on what children need. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to be, you know. I'm still trying to work out what I need, but I've got a bit of an idea that I'm happy to talk about and listen to your ideas too, and I think that's the start, right? And you know, but all the parenting and care I received was on the sort of pretense that I was a good boy. If I was a good boy, I'd get a good experience and I'd have a good time and the relationships would be good. But that was unrealistic for someone like me, because I couldn't be good, despite wanting to be, despite promising to myself and others I would be. But I couldn't, because the feelings I was experiencing were too overwhelming. And I was in a personal development workshop about 18 months ago, and I was doing some it was like this weekend retreat thing, and I was doing some inner child work, and I was talking to the facilitator, and yeah, like they were doing what they were doing, and I was sort of engaging in this process. And there was a point where I was really angry, and I said, I'm really angry at you for doing this, and be, you know, and she just said to me, you know what, Ian, your anger is welcome. And I fell off my flipping chair. I couldn't believe it, because no one had ever said to me as a child, your pain, your misery, your trauma, your anger, your hurt, that's welcome, and we're going to contain it, and we're going to keep it safe, and we're going to validate it. It was never, no one ever said that. And you know, perhaps the level of consciousness that was available then may have not been available, but it just, it's changed the way I see things, and I've worked with young people since then, and whatever's come up, I say that's welcome. We'll contain that. That's fine. We can hold that. You know, that's really important, and that's a key message that I took from those experiences. And eventually, I ended up back in the children's home, you know, and went round different foster homes, and you know, it was just difficult. And I had some really lovely experiences where I stayed in one placement for over a year, and you know, we had holidays, and I had a BMX, and I went out on my BMX, and I made friends, and you know, not without challenges, but you know, there were points of sustainability and stability, and eventually, you know, for the same stuff that was always going on in the background, those scenarios would break down. And I left care about a week before my 16th, a week before my 17th birthday. I was 16, and I went into supported accommodation. And by the time I hit 10 years old in care, I started getting arrested, because at 10.5 you could be criminally responsible as a result of the Jamie Bolger case review. I think it's probably too young in this country, well, for any child, but that's my view. And you know, by the time I was 12, I had like 15 offences, and because I had this bit of stability, the courts did a complete discharge, and they said I was too young to realise what I was doing was wrong. But I'd already had sort of a strong introduction to the criminal justice system, and I kind of knew it. And then when I sort of hit 13, 14, I started getting arrested again. And so I'd had a criminal record by the time I left care, one that had been dismissed, and then another one that I accumulated again. And within all of that, I started taking drugs. Now, you know, my story is one of addiction, and you know, the two myths about addiction is that, one, that drugs are addictive. That's not true. And two, that drug addiction is a choice. I don't believe that's true either. And to qualify those statements, so you know, drug addiction is a choice. You know, I've sat in multi-story car parks injecting heroin, sobbing, crying, you know, not wanting to do it, but not knowing how to stop. And I know I did not choose that. And as for, you know, it's a myth that drugs are addictive. Well, if everybody took a drug, then everyone who became addicted, then if drugs are addictive, then anyone who ever took a drug would become addicted. So, and lots of people take drugs and don't become addicted. So we have to ask ourselves, why are those individuals who do become addicted susceptible to addiction? And I believe, you know, I believe in brain development and kind of some of the neuroscientific, you know, information that's available to us, and the biopsychosocial model, where the biology of the brain is impacted by psychological and sociological factors, and you know, and how the brain develops, you know, is key. And I think the more we understand brain development, I think the more we can understand, you know, people and how adversity impacts us. And so, you know, I was taking drugs from the age of 10 up until 21, and I left care at 17, and I was in full flow of addiction. And if I had £1 for every time someone said for me, what's wrong with you and why can't you stop, I'd be wealthy, you know. And addiction is this, you know, it's the experience is an obsession of the mind. An obsession is a thought that excludes all other thoughts and creates a compulsion to act out on that obsession, causing endless loops of self-destructive behaviour patterns. And you know, I was out of care at sort of just before my 17th birthday, and within a year I was in custody, and you know, YOI, you know, Portland's young offenders institution. And I guess for me, I was, you know, obsessed with using, you know, getting and using and finding ways and means to get more. You know, because I just didn't want to feel the way I felt. You know, I didn't want to feel, and if I, you know, it's taken me a long time to understand this, but the core of my being, you know, and all the behaviours I did to try and escape that sense of feeling that I could, was like this deep sadness inside of me that felt so inconsolable. And you know, I didn't want to feel that sadness. I didn't want to live with it, because it was too much, you know. And when I was 8 years old, a significant event happened in my life, you know, where my relationship finally broke down with my mum, and something happened to me in that moment, and I switched off, because I disassociated. And my adult life is about accessing who I was before I was 8 years old, and trying to reconnect to that person, because that's you know, where my innocence was, and my joy and my hope and my prosperity and my optimism for life, you know. And post 8 years old, you know, something happened to me, and that left me, and that's, you know, what I was contending with. And you know, I could write a book on drugs and addiction, but the truth is, you know, where it took me is what's important. And I ended up, you know, in a police station in Brighton when I was 21, and I had no veins left in my arm. I was 8 stone in weight. I hadn't changed or washed my clothes for weeks. I was street homeless, and I was using about £200 worth of crack and heroin a day. And you know, I just abandoned the human being within, you know, and I just really had given up. And at that point, sort of the only thing that was holding me together was a little bit of denial, that psychological coping strategy designed to keep us emotionally stable in unstable times. And denial is a really helpful human resource. And I think when we work with children and young people and adults around, you know, ultimately denial conceals the truth, right? You know, and I believe that, you know, my path has been one of trying to go back to truth, you know. But when we present someone truth, sometimes that truth is subjective, almost always in the social world, and we're taking away from them, you know, what is keeping them emotionally stable. So are we there to contain what's left over if we do that, you know, and stay with people? So that's important. And then, you know, and in the end, I was in this chair with a solicitor, and she was really kind and compassionate and caring towards me, and showed me sort of endearing language like love, darling, sweetheart. And you know, and that was the beginning. And I sat back in the chair, I took a deep breath, and I said, I don't want to live like this anymore, you know. And I surrendered, and I felt the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. That boy who had gone through all those foster families, all the prison sentences, and I did 6 prison sentences, over 10 prisons, you know, over 3 years of my life incarcerated. Every time I got out of prison, the same thing, like when I got out of a foster home and on to the next one. Made promises to myself, would have passed a lie detector test, and I would have passed it because I was telling the truth. But I didn't know what was in store for me. I didn't understand the feelings I was living with, and the belief systems that were driving all that behaviour, and that cycle I was trapped in. And eventually I got sentenced to 3 years because all the offences I had were building up, and I was told I was going to get 6 years by my barrister. And I remember stood in the dock in the Crown Court, and they said 3 years, and I remember this overwhelming sense of disappointment. And I remember thinking, what am I going to do when they let me out? Where am I going to go? And every time they let me out of prison, I didn't want to leave, you know. And there are about 85,000 people in prison at any given time. 27% of that prison population are former looked after children. You know, 35% of that prison population are physically dependent to drugs. You know, it costs £119,000 to send someone to prison, from the point they get in conflict with the law to the minute they get behind the prison door. It costs £40,000 a year to incarcerate somebody. You know, if you just take the £40,000 a year of the 27%, the 85,000 of care leavers, it's about £980 million a year we're spending on incarcerating care leavers. The corporate parent this is, you know, so it's quite an unsophisticated philosophy we're working with, even if you want to think from a neoliberal perspective. You know, there is an economic debate to be had, and we've got to move away from these legalistic Victorian value systems in which we're, you know, condemning people who are suffering from addiction and trauma and you know, brain development that hasn't been supported in healthy ways. You know, there has to be a different approach to what we're doing. And recently I've been doing some work around delivering workshops to prison staff, and I've been researching the amount of care leavers who have died in custody, and it's horrendously sad, very, very sad, huge failings, you know. And we got to start doing things differently. And you know, so, and I left prison, you know, in 2009, and I managed to get some recovery support. I got onto a 12-step drug rehabilitation program, and I got some help, you know, through a charity that was in the prison, and that project's been closed down now, but it was the RAPS, Rehabilitation for Addicted Prisoners Trust, and now it's called the Forward Trust. And that specific project and that specific prison is closed down, but I still do a lot of work with that charity and try and support them in their mission. And, you know, what was a turning point for me was in HMP Camp Hill, you know, and it wasn't a very nice prison. It was on the Isle of Wight, and I didn't really know many people. There was like a very volatile drug culture there, and it was very violent, and I didn't really feel safe, and I was also quite angry and frightened, and I didn't really know how to manage all those feelings. So I adopted the prison culture and sort of this persona, and I'd send the representative to the world, you know, to try and survive, because the way that you have to behave in prison, which is conducive to your survival in prison, isn't conducive to like getting out of that world, and that's the challenge, you know. And another reason why we need to shift and change the way we treat people who go to prison, who are suffering. But in the prison grounds there were ducks, and in the summer there were ducklings, and I had a cell on the ground floor. That sounds more nice than it is, and I used to save some of my bread from canteen and getting my meals, and I'd throw the bread out the window and feed the ducks, so I get to see the ducklings. And I used to feel something when I saw the ducklings, and you know, and I used to think, well, maybe I'm a good person, maybe there's something in me still that can do good in this world, because, you know, I feel like I want those ducks to be okay, you know, and I'm not in an environment where that's being cultivated or supported or nurtured. So I was getting it from the ducks. And I think that for me, you know, the key to recovery and rehabilitation's a bit of a play on words, isn't it? Because it's to suggest that we're like putting something back to its original state that had some kind of ability. And for me, it was about habilitation. It wasn't rehabilitation. I had nothing to go back to, you know. But it's important that I need to be reminded of my humanity, you know, and I think that the kind of work I do keeps me honest, because it reminds me of my humanity, you know, and that's why I really like anything that's sort of connected to contributing to people's development and supporting people, you know. And when I got let out of prison, I managed to get into a second stage rehab, which was massively important for me to try and integrate back into society and decondition myself from the conditioning of institutionalisation, and you know, continue the work of, you know, dismantling the architectures of my own personal rhetoric that had been so harmful for me for so long, and being in new environments that could cultivate, you know, ideas about human life that were more conducive to a harmonious, you know, lifestyle, you know, that could make me be a contributing member, and self-care and interdependence, because I don't buy independent. None of us are. We're all interdependent, and we need to teach people coming out of custody and young people coming out of care to be interdependent, you know, to build social capital and connections and resources for sustainability, because sustainability is how can we meet future need, and nobody can do that completely on their own, you know. And it was all this sort of thinking that I needed to be introduced to and supported with, and I was lucky to get that. And the last 10 years have been beautiful. You know, I've been all around the world. I ended up in Australia for a year. I ended up in, you know, Jerusalem studying Orthodox Judaism. They offered me a scholarship to become a rabbi, and I didn't take that up. You know, I kind of, you know, I've learned to drive. I have a driving license, having been disqualified 5 times. The vehicle I live in and drive isn't stolen. I pay tax. I've got a job. You know, I'm a contributing member. I used to be really excited about paying tax and making an amends to society. I'm less inspired about that now, but I'd still do it because I believe contributing is the right thing to do. I have friends. You know, I have experiences. People love me. You know, and today someone told me they love me, and I believed them. I didn't question it. I didn't feel frightened when they said it. You know, I've had years of abstinence recovery. I've supported many men into recovery. I've worked with lots of young people, hundreds of foster carers up and down the country, around the world, and had, you know, wonderful opportunities to talk about some of the ideas I have about life, and sort of get an education and go back. And I did a degree at Birmingham City University, which was like really empowering. I didn't read my first book until I was 18, and I come out of a first-class degree. And here's the thing, like, you know, these experiences, you know, they're not exclusive to me. You know, it's what's possible if we support people to make positive changes in their lives and get alongside them and try and see the world from their perspective, and you know, share that narrative with them, and sort of try and find out, you know, the best way moving forward. And I think Dan Hughes wrote about that. He called it intersubjectivity, but I know he's not responsible for that concept, but I really like it, you know. And it's just about kind of supporting people, you know, and which is a very sort of generalized statement to make, I appreciate, but what I will say is that you know, I've experienced a lot of adversity over the years, deaths and you know, yeah, lots have gone on, but the only reason I've been able to get through all of that is because I've had people around me to support me, and my capacity to continue to access help. And kind of on more of a sort of philosophical level, you know, I've had everything I've ever wanted. I've got none of it how I thought I was going to get it, and none of it's done what I thought it was going to do, you know. And having attained quite a lot in the world, you know, based on my own standards where I started out from, you know, I've kind of got to a place now where I believe there is a reality beyond the animalistic five senses, and I need to try and find ways to access that reality, and there's more to life than this, you know, and that helps me make this make sense, you know, and let go of the things that I can't control, and because, you know, as a social worker or a helper or a humanitarian, I'm powerless over people. I'm not helpless, but I'm powerless. And the reason why I'm powerless is because I can't control outcomes. I can put the intervention and I can hope for the best based on all the theoretical knowledge that we have about people, places and situations, but we can't control it. I can't, you know. If you can, I'm really interested to have a conversation about that, but you know, I can't, and I have to have a lot of faith and trust and courage to let go and believe in people. And the foster carer was talking to me not long ago and asking lots of questions, and it dawned on me that there was a real eagerness to make everything okay, to make everything work, and I said, you know, by all means we have to protect children from new harm and help minimize, you know, previous harm, and we got to keep children safe. That's our absolute priority, but we have to learn how to suffer. We can't not suffer, you know, and I've had to learn how to suffer and to be with my pain. And we have to cultivate, you know, environments where that's welcome and we can contain that and we can support people to be with their pain. And I think there's a real philosophical element to helping people that is often not discussed enough. And for me, that links into a much bigger picture. And I'm really interested in having more conversations like that. And I don't have the answers, far from it. But I think that there's room for that discussion. Okay, cool. Well, that's me in a nutshell. We've got 10 minutes left. Sophia, are you back online?
Yeah, I'm back. Thank you, Ian. So if we just open up, we haven't got any questions in the chat, but if we just open it up now to anyone within the room virtually that wants to ask Ian a question, you're more than welcome. So I'll just give it a few moments for anyone to ask any questions.
Could go through the gratitude lists.
Yeah, we could go to and if there's anything after that, then people can maybe have a few moments to think. Yeah, okay, good stuff. So did anybody write their 10 things they're grateful for that they might want to share one of or all of or some of? Brian. Hello, Brian. Hi, Amy.
I'm happy to share some of my 10 grateful things. A lot of mine do revolve around my family, so things like the relationship I have with my daughter, my husband and my marriage, my external family. But I'm also grateful to be working in this current climate, I think, as well, because I know that although my job may be hard, I know that there's a lot of people out there that have lost out on employment, but I'm also grateful for my health. I went through something very difficult a few weeks ago, and the fact that I'm still here to process and reflect on that, I think is really good as well. So and in terms of the text message, I actually messaged a colleague that I formed quite a close relationship with, and I just messaged to say that I'm grateful for that friendship and that we can talk, because I think that sometimes we forget that we can. And I think that goes into internalising a lot of those issues that we tend to feel that we have to face alone, because we forget that we can talk to people when we need to.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Thanks, Amy. Sophia, did you write a gratitude list?
Yes, I did. So I wrote that I'm very thankful for my health. Without your health, you haven't got anything in my world. I think it's really important in terms of your health. My family, I'm very grateful for my family, my parents, my siblings, my nephew, my job. I'm really grateful for my friends, my good friends, including you, Ian. The opportunities that I have in life, my faith, and also my adopted cat that I have, which doesn't belong to me. So I'm very grateful for all of them.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sophia.
You're welcome.
Hi, Deborah.
Hi, Ian. So I just wanted to share a couple of mine. Mine are very much similar to Sophia's and Amy's, except I've got choice on there as well, because I feel very grateful to just have choice in my life. I'm reading a book about kind of ancient Chinese culture at the moment, in which just women have absolutely no say over their lives at all. So for me, I'm really grateful for that at the moment.
Great.
Thanks, Deborah. That's lovely. Has anyone else got a gratitude?
I'm happy to share mine, Ian. Sorry, I'll show myself as well. Hi.
Hiya.
So I just put similar to others, really. I'm grateful for my physical health. I like to run. And every time I do go out running, I sort of think how grateful I am for that, because I know people who, friends who sort of live with chronic pain conditions, and even my own family members who've got health conditions which mean they can't do that, yet they would love to. And just being able to get out and experience beautiful places and scenery. And I was talking to my partner over the weekend, because we went to the beach, and saying I dread the day when I can't get to the beach. I can't see the beach. I can't get to the sea. I'm grateful for my family and my friends, my faith. As Sophia said, choice and privilege. And sort of the more I've done this job, the more I recognise the privilege I have in my life, really. And I come from a background where I've sort of had adversity in different ways and struggles, but compared to so many people, I've got so much privilege in life, and so I'm very grateful for that and recognise that. So yeah, and your session was really good, Ian. It was really, really inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. That's lovely. So I put to be clean and sober, to be able to read and write, to breathe, food, water, that people love me, ability to communicate, social work qualification, and my freedom, especially not to be in prison, and a second chance. And I think that there's a strong reason why I ask people to do this, because for me, if I'm not traveling so well, there's sort of like three things that put me back on track really easily. So, is gratitude, connection, and service. And being a recovering addict and having to engage in lots of different personal development programs, every morning I wake up, I try and just take 10 minutes and I write down 10 things that I'm grateful for. I try and sit still, and I just try and listen to what's going on, my wants, my needs, my fears, my concerns, stuff that's going on out there or in there. And I just try and put that to one side for a minute and just to be still, and if I'm, so gratitude is something we can cultivate through an administrative process, or we can say it out loud, which is an is an affirmation. Connection is really important, plugging into people, and not being alone. and then obviously being a service, contributing to other people's development. And that's why I ask people to send a message to somebody, just to let them know you care about them, that you love them, or that you're there for them, or that they're important to you. And I try and send a couple of them out most days, and I often get them as well from other friends. And this is something we have to consciously cultivate. It's not just going to happen for us. And the jobs we do just suck us in sometimes, and we can't see a way out. And I know that, I was quite disappointed to find out that the world isn't a resource for me to feel better. That was a bummer. But what I can be is a better resource to make a contribution to the world, and through doing that, I feel better, So, and there's buckets of research out there. Check out Brené Brown, Power of Vulnerability. That's a really good book. We've got more questions.
Yeah, so we've got one question, Ian, here. It's from Amelia Ball. And Amelia said, as a young child, how would you have liked your negative emotions to be validated and contained? What could a foster carer have done in that instance to have helped you feel a sense of security with those emotions?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that the first step is sort of, consciousness. So for foster carers to be conscious that that's what is helpful and what could be done, and then to, understand what I might be communicating, because I didn't have the vocabulary to say this. It's about the behavior was an expression. It was my way of saying I'm hurting right now and I don't know how else to tell you. And I know that fostering is a really, really tough role and very rewarding too. And it's easy to take it personally. And so I'd say to a foster carer, don't take the behavior personally and try and work out what's being communicated. And then also, there's lots of intricacies within families and micro communications, which can be really hurtful to a young person who's looked after and hasn't always lived with that family. Little comments based on humour. If you're not, maybe didn't eat all your dinner, and there's a comment about not getting your pudding because you didn't eat all your dinner, which is perfectly fine in a family that have always been together. But a child, that could represent something really painful and could kind of close them down. There was a situation where I didn't eat the steak one day because it was hurting my teeth. I had a problem with my teeth as a kid, and then I was sort of like this whole. So when they next did the meal, I didn't get steak. I got something else, and there was this big hoo-ha about how I wasn't allowed steak because I didn't eat it last time. And I still think about that, and my feelings still feel hurt when I engage in that story. And I think about, oh God, I was really excluded from that activity of eating steak, and there was no sort of real understanding about what the challenges were, and I felt more rejected. So how can I feel safe and contained? And they meant no harm. They didn't want me to feel those feelings. They didn't mean that at all. They were just a family doing what they were doing. So it's about being aware and conscious about the intricacies of daily family life that could impact a child. It's not easy.
Great, thank you. And there's one more question here from Lisa Dada, I think it's pronounced. Ian, I've worked in prisons and youth offending for many years, and I wondered if there's anything in the regimes you were in that were helpful.
I think kindness is really important, and I don't think being a prison officer is an easy job. I think that the solicitor in the police station, who kind of was kind to me and compassionate towards me, was the beginning of change for me. And I don't think we should underestimate what that can do. And I found that prison officers, had to be quite hard at times, and that I don't think that really supported me to feel safe in what was already a hard environment. And I think that, the Tibetan book of Living and Dying says that when compassion is present, then we're able to see the truth. And I think it's about, about recognizing that you're in an institution that has, long-standing values that have not been conducive to human change. And it's really difficult because it's, I don't want to say it's all shit, because it's not, but I think a lot of work needs to be done. So I think consciously and how you're engaging people in that system. There's more to this question, isn't there?
Yeah, I think there's just some comments at the end. Yeah, so my husband is also a governing governor and very invested in habilitation, and it's funny as he invests in birds and animals for prisoners to form connections.
So
yeah,
so what we have there is exactly what I'm asking you to do, is to realise your agency within the position you're in. I'd like to speak to him and maybe try and do some work with him, or I don't know, consultation, whatever. He sounds like a really good guy, and you know, I did a TED talk called The Gift of Desperation. Maybe send that to him, and if he wants to talk to me afterwards, we can. Yeah, he is. I like that, Lisa. Yeah. Oh, and you come from Brighton. Well, we got it made. Contact me, please.
Okay, so we've come to an end, Ian. There's lots and lots of thank yous in the chat as well, which we can share with you after this. So we're going to have to end it here, but thank you so much for your time, Ian. And I'm sure everyone's really enjoyed Ian's session today. And like I said at the beginning, I'm sure you're reflecting lots now after the session today. So thank you, everyone.
Sophie, there is a hand up just before we go.
Oh, is there? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure whose name it is.
It's Linda Evans.
Linda
Oh, it's Linda. Do you want to come in, Linda? Sorry, I didn't see that. Linda, do you want to unmute? Linda hear us? Oh, here we go, Linda. Hi, Linda. If you want to unmute, can't hear you.
Oh, hello, Linda. You're on mute, Linda.
I think Linda's connection isn't great. Linda's from BCU, isn't she? I think.
Yeah. I remember Linda well. She came in a lot.
Linda, if you just press unmute. It's on the top bar.
You waved the cursor against your screen.
She can't do it. If you want to type it in the chat box then, and we can share it with Ian.
Or if you have a question,
Yeah.
you can type it in, and
Yeah,
I can
you
try.
can type it in. Yeah. Okay. Also, Ian, someone's asked if they can have your contact details for any foster care training. So we Do you want to put it in the chat box there, Ian? Do you want to put your email address, anything in the chat box, and that can be, we can also share it afterwards as well.
You know about information governance, don't you, Sophia?
Oh, yes,
That's to come from ianpresents@gmail.com, and my Twitter is @ianpresents.
Okay. So, okay, if we end the session now, sorry, Linda, if you've got anything you want to type in the box, then please, or email Ian. You've got his email address there. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
See you. We'll just stay on in for a bit. Oh, Linda couldn't get through.